Hi, I am Kelly. Oops! Do you know how she came into existence? Let's find out.
Welcome to this lesson on sexual reproduction in plants. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify the reproductive parts of a flower and describe the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. The process by which all living things produce young ones that look like themselves is called reproduction. As we know, plants reproduce either sexually or asexually. Today, we will discuss sexual reproduction in plants. Most plants have flowers. They are the most attractive part and the reproductive part of a plant. A flower may have a stalk-like structure called the pedicel. If the pedicel is present, the sepals, petals, stamens, and the pistil are arranged on its flattened tip called the receptacle. However, all plants may not have a pedicel. The stamen is the male reproductive part and the pistil is the female reproductive part of a flower. They produce gametes, also known as reproductive cells, which help in reproduction. Let's take a closer look at each of these reproductive parts. This is the stamen, the male reproductive part of a flower. Each stamen consists of a long filament that bears two knob-like anthers at its tip. The anther contains pollen sacs, which produces pollen grains. These are yellow powdery particles containing the male gametes or the male reproductive cells. Flowers have either 3 or 5 or multiples of 3 or 5 stamens. Pistil is the centrally located female reproductive part of the flower. It consists of 3 major parts: ovary, style, and stigma. The basal swollen part of the pistil is called the ovary. It contains numerous ovules. Each ovule contains a female gamete or egg cell. The long elongated part of the pistil is called the style. It supports the terminal part of the pistil called the stigma. The stigma helps to collect pollen grains during pollination. Look at this hibiscus flower. It has both stamens and pistil. This is a papaya flower. It has only stamens. Interestingly, this one has only a pistil. It is not necessary for every flower to have both stamen and pistil. A flower that has either a stamen or a pistil is known as a unisexual flower. Examples of plants that have unisexual flowers are cucumber, maize, and watermelon. A flower that has both stamen and pistil is called a bisexual flower. Examples of plants having bisexual flowers are mustard and rose. In plants, during sexual reproduction, the male gamete fuses with the female gamete. Let's find out how this takes place when the stamen and the pistil are not close to each other. The pollen grains from the stamen need to fall on the stigma for sexual reproduction to take place. This is made possible by pollen-carrying agents like wind, water, animals, birds, and of course, humans. These agents help to transfer pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. This process of transferring pollen grains from the anther to the stigma is called pollination. This hibiscus flower has just received a pollen grain from another hibiscus plant. The transfer of pollen grains from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower on another plant of the same type is known as cross-pollination. If the pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower, it is termed as self-pollination. However, self-pollination does not occur in most plants. It occurs mostly in plants that belong to the beans family, also called legumes. A few examples of plants that self-pollinate are peas, beans, peanuts, and clovers. The pollen has now reached the stigma. Now that the pollen has reached the stigma, the male gametes contained in the pollen grain needs to reach the ovule present in the ovary. This is made possible by a tube that grows out of the pollen towards the ovule through the style. This is where the male gamete fuses with the female gamete to form a zygote. This process is called fertilization. After fertilization, the zygote develops to form an embryo. The ovule develops to form a seed. During this process, the petals, sepals, stamens, style, and stigma dry and fall off. This seed contains an embryo. In time, the ovary becomes the fruit and the ovary wall becomes the fruit wall. Fruit is a ripened ovary formed after fertilization. They can either be fleshy or dry. When the ripened fruit consists of soft pulpy wall and juice, it is called a fleshy fruit. A few examples of such fruits are orange, tomato, apple, and mango. On the other hand, when the wall of the fruit becomes hard and dry as it ripens, it is called a dry fruit. A few examples of such fruits are almonds and walnuts. Have you ever wondered how it would be if all mango trees are found just in one place in India? That sounds really disastrous, right? If saplings were to grow just below the parent plant, there would be a lot of competition for sunlight, water, minerals, and space. This would result in the growth of unhealthy plants. Hence, seeds need to be dispersed to prevent competition between the seedlings for space, sunlight, water, and nutrients. It also enables the plant to propagate into new areas for wider distribution. Through dispersal, the seeds and fruits are carried away to far-off places by agents such as wind, water, animals, and of course, humans. Let's take a closer look at each agent that assists in seed dispersal. Seeds and fruits dispersed by wind are normally light and small. This makes it easy for them to be carried to distant places. There are a few types of seeds and fruits that are bigger in size, which are also dispersed by the wind. These seeds and fruits have certain adaptations, like wings or hairy structures. These hairy structures or wings help them to stay afloat for longer periods of time. Examples of seeds that use various adaptations for wind dispersal are drumstick, maple, cotton grass, hairy fruit of the sunflower, and the hairy seed of madar. Look at that coconut. It's floating in water. The seeds of the coconut trees fall into the water when they ripen. Its ability to float helps it get dispersed to far-off places by water. Other examples of plants that use this method of dispersal are lotus and the pond iris. Another method of seed dispersal is by animals. When animals brush across plants, fruits like the xanthium, which have spine-like structures, get attached to the fur of animals or clothes of men. Fruits like the blackberry are eaten by animals and birds. These fruits have a hard seed embedded inside, which is swallowed by the animal while consuming the fruit. Once the fruit is eaten, the animals expel the seeds along with their droppings. Ah, what's that sound? That's the sound of balsam fruit bursting. Some seeds like the balsam are dispersed by the bursting of their fruit. The pods present in these seeds dry up in the sun. This causes the pod to split with great force, thereby dispersing the seeds away from the parent plant. Some examples of plants that use this method of seed dispersal by explosion are mustard, lady's finger, peas, bean pod, and castor. I hope the information in this lesson has helped you understand the reproductive parts of a plant and the process of sexual reproduction in plants better. Congratulations! You have successfully completed this lesson on sexual reproduction in plants. You will now be able to identify the reproductive parts of a flower and describe the process of sexual reproduction in flowering plants.